Hi, my name is Cameron and I'm the owner and operator of Mobile Body Scans. Today we're going to go through an interpretation of an InBody 570 report through the InBody app. I'm just going to load up my mobile phone here. That is going to be able to show you my own personal result sheet that you'll be able to follow along with in the background. Feel free to pause these videos, replay it, do whatever you need to do in terms of it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the person who's giving you this recording, or you can find us on social media as well. So the way that I have found my InBody scan, you'll see from here, you'll open up your report into the InBody app, which is the dashboard. We are going to click on detail. We are going to scroll down and we are then going to hit view InBody test results. This gives you an A4 page that you can just hit the download button in the top right. I believe it's on all devices, Android and iOS. And you could share that report in whatever way you wanted to. We are going to go through the analysis today, and if you have an interpretation guide or were given an interpretation guide, you can follow along and use my interpretation alongside that to gain further information or understanding. The first thing that we are going to look at today is the first three lines here, which are our weight, our skeletal muscle mass, and our fat mass. These three lines represent three different shapes depending on your weight, your muscle mass, and your fat mass. We either see a C shape, which is the weight and fat mass, the longest two lines, and muscle mass, the shortest. An I shape, where each of these lines is relatively straight up and down, or a D shape, which I am close to, which is the muscle mass in the longest position, fat mass, and overall weight in a slightly shorter line. That is the most desirable in terms of what InBody states, because we now know with the modern science that muscle mass is king. It is able to keep us functional, and over a longer period of time, if you have a high muscle mass, it is okay to be a little bit heavier. This is where we then roll into the next two lines below, BMI and body fat percentage. BMI is a very archaic way of looking at our health of our body. At the end of the day, it is purely the measurement of our height and our weight. It does not take into consideration any other thing from that. So if you are not a normal height, you are not going to be able to achieve a normal BMI. And at the end of the day, it is all bell curved, guys. So think about it this way. I am a pretty fit individual. I've been in the fitness industry for 10 years and I am well and truly in the obese category on BMI. I have got a few extra kilos, but I am not in an obese category, and I will show you that a little bit later on with the weight control figure that we'll talk about. If we now come back to breaking down the first three lines that we've just talked about, so skeletal muscle mass and our body fat mass. The first one we're going to look at is our body fat mass. So scrolling across to the right-hand side of the screen and looking at segmental fat analysis. This is a great way of understanding where our fat mass is held, and then also the possibility of what sort of level of fat mass we could lose from each of the 5 areas that this machine tests. So as you can see here, I've got 1.3 kilos in each of my arms, which is around 199% of what could be in my body in that standpoint. We can never be 0% fat, guys. So at the end of the day, this number is we're trying to get it towards 100% if we are trying to lose fat. So I could theoretically halve that number, get it from 1.3 to 0.7. That's as low as theoretically I should be looking at. You can, of course, go in lower, but generally, we're looking to try and get to that 100% if you want to look at it. And it's a great way to understand how many kilos of fat mass you could possibly lose from a key area of your body through progressive training. We can't spot train, as I'm sure your trainers or health professionals have told you. We're now going to look at the other side of that coin. So now we're looking at your segmental lean analysis. So again, under BMI and body fat percentage, we've got 5 lines. And again, it is showing us the top line of each of those segments is how much muscle mass is in each of those segmental areas. So a little bit of imbalance, so 200 grams difference between my right arm and left arm, but I am right-handed. That kind of makes a bit of sense. Then from there, we've got my trunk fat muscle mass and then my leg muscle mass as well. Again, you've got the percentages there, and this is showing that I have a higher percentage of muscle mass in my arms than I do in any other area of my body, which is not uncommon in this day and age. From there, we're going to swing back across to the right-hand side, and we're going to stay here for a little bit. These machines are able to do our segmental circumferences, which is done at the widest point of each of these anatomical areas. It is very different to doing tape measurements because this is looking for the absolute widest cylinder or widest circumference of anywhere on these areas. So if you do have a circumferential change here, it is the truest circumferential change that you can go by. Not saying that tape measurements aren't good. These are just a different level and a different way of looking at it. Below our segmental circumferences in all of those key areas, we have our visceral fat level. Visceral fat is the bad fats that are sitting around our organs. These are the sort of fats that we want to try and minimize. This scale goes from 0 to 25. If you are over 25, you will not be able to use this as a metric, theoretically, until you're at 24. The difference between each of those levels is an unknown amount. It is an in-body specific thing, but the idea of it is the density and also the amount of fat that is held in those areas. We would ideally like to see this number below 10. That is the ideal range that in-body guides us as professionals to interpret these scans to. From there, we're going to go into the research parameters here. Intercellular water is how much water you are holding inside of your muscle mass. So it's a great way of showing the hydration or the amount of sarcoplasmic fluid that is held inside of your muscles. And ideally, we want to see this on the high end. Again, there is a way of understanding this. If you've got a high muscle mass, which I do about 130% of what is expected, I should be up in that top end. And again, it's also a way of looking at hydration. Hydration is more our extracellular water, which is the water that is sitting outside of our muscle mass or our tissues. This is the water that is available in our system most of the time in that standpoint. There is a point where extracellular water is bad, where we have edemas, and we'll discuss that a little bit later on. Below extracellular water, we've got base metabolic rate. This is how many calories you burn in a coma, guys. Not how many calories you burn with your thermogenesis and your exercise or anything like that. That is all on top of this. Again, this is a great number to be discussing with a health professional, whether it's a trainer, a nutritionist, and from that standpoint, there is a lot of information out there on the web as well about base metabolic rate. And we're going to cover something about recommended intake later on this research parameter as well. Bone mineral content is not bone density, guys. It is an in-body specific one that is done with the bones that the machines actually can read through the impedance categories. It is your femurs and a few other key bones. But the idea of it is we want to see that as high as possible. I don't know anyone out there that wants to see low bone density. Bone density is something that's very important as we age, because if we have a fall, it is a relativity towards that perspective of breakages and other stuff. So bone mineral content has a relativity. And again, if you're looking at scan to scan, we want to see this the same or higher throughout our training programs. Body cell mass is very similar. It is about the healthy cells the machine is seeing as conductive. If we have a high impedance in our cells, there is a very technical terminology behind that. You will see this as a low amount, but the higher this number, theoretically, the better, because we've got more healthy cells in there as well. Arm circumference and arm muscle circumference is a great average, or it is the average of your two arms. The idea of this is we're seeing how much of a bingo wing or how much flab, whatever you want to use the wording of, is between those two cylinders. So we imagine like the internal cylinder as our muscle and the external cylinder is our body. Now, we do have a point in this one. There is information to state that if this is over 10 centimeters, there could be hormonal imbalances or plenty of other things. But again, we want to see these two becoming closer in that perspective. So muscle mass may be increasing to cover some of that circumference, or maybe losing fat mass, and seeing our arm circumference come down towards our muscle circumference. A great little metric to have a look at. As I mentioned before about base metabolic rate, InBody has done a calculation. And the calculation for me is that I have about an allowance of about 700 calories per day for exercise. Now, this is not specific to me. It is not something that's been done in a ultimately scientific manner, which you can do with your trainers, looking at NEAT and a few other acronyms that come in here. But it gives you an idea that we should not be eating below or at our base metabolic rate, because that would have us in a very low calorie perspective. For some people that's needed, but for most, in my experience, it is not. There's three more things that we're going to look at today on this result sheet to finish up. The first one is what we were talking about before with intercellular water. You've got this EWC ratio. Now, if you are over 0.4 400. The machine is not going to give you an InBody score. It's going to say seek professional or seek professional advice. That is because you are deemed to have edemas, and this machine is not able to give you a relative score because of that in some ways. What is an edema? It is a high amount of fluid held in an area of the body. These machines are not able to analyze where that edema is, but it is saying you have a high amount of water just sitting externally, which is not ideal. It can lead to a bunch of things, so it is best to seek some medical help on that and be looking towards compression garments and other things. The InBody score is a great relativity to just use on a singular fact. If you have an interpretation guide, you're going to be able to see what InBody categorizes as that score. To me, as a fitness professional, I do not like what they say in there. I don't think it's real or relative in terms of the percentages or the numbers that's given out. And it also does not stop at 100. I have seen scans of 105 or 107 on this. What I try and say is that we always want to see this increasing, okay? If you do a scan today and one in 6 weeks, we want to see you have a higher number next time. If the number has decreased, it generally means there is something negative in there. It might be that you've lost muscle mass, you've increased fat mass. It's not a true negative. It's just a great way of understanding what the importance of your scan actually is. We now scroll up to the top and back to my first point, or one of my first points in this video today. My target weight in my weight control figure is 91 kilos. So even though through BMI and through other things, I am obese, I have less than 10 kilos of total body weight that I could lose before I am in probably the most healthy standpoint that InBody or any of the calculations could see me. This is a great little understanding for you because that is the lowest body weight that you can possibly be at without losing muscle mass. So for people that are a bigger individual, this may surprise you and you may only have 20 kilos rather than 40 kilos to lose, which is a much more attainable and achievable goal. For other people, it may give you an indication that you actually need to increase your muscle mass to try and benefit your health as well. So this is a great little guide and again, a indication of where you could be taking your body. There is other points across this scan in terms of the nutritional evaluation and a few other things, but today I've covered the key components of your InBody interpretation. If you would like to seek more information, please feel free to reach out to the place that you got the scan at, and they will be able to get you in touch with myself, and we can go from there if you want to look at a highly in-depth and scientific interpretation. I hope you've enjoyed your interpretation today. Hope this has given you some clarity in terms of what you're looking at. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the people that have got your scan through in that standpoint. Have a great afternoon, guys, or great day.